this is Tuesday, the 22nd of September, and most of the time, the idea behind these interviews is that we do them in such a way that they're sort of evergreen-ish. But it's important to note that it's Tuesday, the 22nd of September, in no small part because our guest today is Anna Zeigler, and she writes for the Resurgent, and she's somewhere in lovely Louisiana. I told you before we started that what question one was going to be, but I guess I'm going to bump that down to question 1B, because question 1A is, how are you guys doing with the storms?
We actually, typically where I am, we're pretty far up north and we don't deal with hurricanes other than rain. Laura was probably one of the worst to hit my area. We were without power for about 4 days. And you can kind of tell just driving around, the energy guys are still, that's our main utility company around here. They're still pretty busy with limbs, and we're going to have a lot of firewood. I hope maybe we'll have some actual winter weather this year because we're going to have the wood for fires. But it's just the way life is here. You expect a couple at least every year. They're going to make some impact. But we're doing okay. We're happy to have power. You go without it for 4 days, and you realize my kids were hilarious. They had no idea. They've never been without power for except maybe more than an hour, and they didn't realize everything it ran.
And the device, going without a device of some sort of screen for, I've got kids,
Yeah.
10 minutes, and they start to wonder about the nature of the universe and
Yes.
what really is happening with the world. Glad to hear that you're okay in managing. I guess so this will be question 1B, and we'll bump the other one to 1C. So what's your definition of winter weather and or the threshold for starting a fire?
I love winter weather. I will start a fire if it's 55-ish, and I know you're laughing. We don't get much of it here, so when we do, we break out the scarves and the turtlenecks, and we milk it for all it's worth.
Right. And this, I assume, is a fireplace, or is this a go outside fire pit, or you do both?
Oh, now we do have a lot of folks around here who have outdoor fire pits. Even in the summers, I guess it's one way you can keep mosquitoes and things like that away and still spend some time outdoors. We actually in my house, just have a gas fireplace
Okay.
because I have a son who's kind of asthmatic, and so actually burning the wood in our house is not great.
Gotcha.
So we're fancy like that. We have the gas logs with the clicker remote.
Hey, if it works, it's I'm all for it. We actually, I'm in suburban Chicago. We have, and the place we're in now, we've only been in for a couple of years, and we have a fireplace that actually burns wood for the first time ever. And what's interesting is the reaction from our kids when we do try to do that, because one of them claims it completely stinks up the house and it smells like burning wood.
Yeah, and see, I like that smell. That's one thing I miss about not having a wood burning, because I grew up with my parents' home. We always had a wood burning, and oh, that's a good smell to me. So
Me too, but the eldest is not a fan. Um, I'm a communications guy by trade, PR, marketing, those sorts of things. So my focus has been till lately on the idea of how can you own a narrative and use it to sell more product or get more people on board with your message. It seems like lately everything is becoming more politically charged and issues are becoming more deemed to be important to everyone than they used to be. And so that's why the last couple discussions that we've had on this podcast have been around the idea of, OMG, there's a narrative out there that this side or that side is better at owning, and what are they going to get out of owning that narrative?
Right.
So, long-winded way of bringing me to what is now question 1C. So, over the weekend, we had the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and now there's a discussion around what happens next.
Yes.
President Trump has said that he will float a name. It's expected on Friday. And after that, I think the phrase is Katie bar the door, because it's going to get a little nutty. And this is
nuttier.
Well, yeah, I guess nuttier. And it's punctuated by what happened this morning, because there are people caught off guard by Senator Mitt Romney, Republican from Utah. Many are familiar with his work, erstwhile presidential candidate. And he has said that he will vote if the president puts a nominee forward, and he will do so before Election Day. There's still an opening in that message that says, he's going to vote based on merit. So, he could decide that the merits of the individual that is put forth do not match up. However, your thoughts on Mitt Romney coming out and saying, in effect, I'm the 51st vote.
Yeah, my mom sent me a text message right after the news broke earlier today, and she said, do you think Romney will go back on his word, or does this mean he's definitely? And I said, I don't see him doing that. I'm curious to what extent these senators have a certainty about who the nominee might be. I think I would see Collins and Murkowski as a no on Amy Barrett, probably, regardless of the circumstances, even if this had happened a year ago and we weren't right up against an election. I see Romney as probably a yes on Barrett. He comes from a very socially conservative state, and I disagreed with his impeachment vote. I felt like that was sort of a petty thing. I don't harbor the Romney hate that some do. I voted for the man. I feel like he understands. I feel like even McCain probably would be a yes here. And who knows with Collins, I feel kind of sorry for her. I thought she was brilliant through the whole Kavanaugh ordeal. Her speech on the floor before that vote was maybe one of her best moments as a U.S. Senator. And she's really come under some unfair attacks from those who have got it in their head that all the GOP needs to go because she didn't vote for the impeachment. And she is much further to the left than I am. I believe she is openly pro-choice. But she's rational. We look around at what else we're dealing with in Washington, and what does it help if Susan Collins goes home? Because whoever replaces her will be no friend to the GOP ever, and it is gonna, likely, unless they're a strong individual, they're gonna go along with, Schumer, if heaven forbid the Democrats take the majority in the Senate. It's always the same ones. We're always discussing Romney and Collins and Murkowski. And, when the dominoes fall, at least with where these judicial nominations have concerned, McConnell always gets the votes. And I feel like Romney knows you fill this seat. This is a lot bigger than Donald Trump or whatever issues he has with Trump, be they personal or political. You fill the seat. And I don't think that Barrett would be an obstacle for Romney the way that she might be ideologically for a Susan Collins.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I heard a theory that Collins, I don't know where I saw this or read it, or if it's just a figment of my own imagination. Any of these things are possible these days, but that Collins is she's not going to win anyway. And if she's trying to do this in order to save her job, she's kind of barking up the wrong tree, because she's not going to get the moderate, she's not going to get the moderate independent voter. Mm-hmm. Because she lost them during the Kavanaugh hearings, so right. Why bother? Right.
I don't know. Maine is almost foreign to me. You know, I don't think I know anyone who lives in Maine. I don't know enough about their statewide politics. My guess is, if we're going to have a GOP senator from Maine, it's going to be a Susan Collins. And, you know, I don't know who the voters were who sent her to the Senate in the first place. And, you know, I don't know. She's not a social conservative. You know, I don't know that I have a good feel for what is going on in that state. Her poll numbers don't look great. To me, you know, it's not like she ran as a Republican. That wasn't a secret. Those are the voters who sent her there. And so at a minimum, they would have to assume she's most likely going to vote for GOP judicial nominations. I don't see where she does herself any favors by not. My hope is that it seems like she's a very smart woman. There's always a little bit of strategy to what she's doing. And I read her statement, and my hope was that, you know, she wanted to get that on the record, obviously, because that's going to appeal to whatever, you know, independents might still be considering voting for. But like you said, you know, I don't know where they would stand after Kavanaugh, and it's a really hard read, because to me, if I'm an independent, what she did during Kavanaugh I thought was wonderful. You know, I mean, even people who despise Trump, they don't really lean to the right. They were horrified by what happened during the Kavanaugh process. And so, you know, they say one of the reasons she's going to lose her seat is because of her Kavanaugh vote. Well, if that's the case, then maybe she was going to lose her seat anyway.
Well, that's one of the other theories too, is that it's a lost cause anyway. So if it's a lost cause, then why not go out with your definition of principle? And her definition of principle appeared to be a little different in 2018 during the Kavanaugh hearings than it would be if she decides not to vote. The other thing about her statement that I thought was interesting is that it didn't say she would not. It just said we shouldn't.
Right.
Or it shouldn't.
I definitely felt like she wanted to get that on the record. And of course, you know, there was a couple of people just having a meltdown after she issued that statement. Oh, right. Collins is out. Collins is out. Well, that's not what it said.
Right.
I think it is all strategic. Everything is strategic. And she wanted that on the record, and basically saying, if I were the one in charge, this is what I would do. But ultimately, she's not the one in charge. It's not her call. And, you know, as a senator, you know, does she vote, even though she's on record as saying she would rather the vote be delayed? You know, I think it looks petty not to vote.
Right.
And if it looks like they have the votes without her, and so that leaves her some wiggle room to do whatever it is she thinks is best for her. I don't know. You know, I don't know what that is. It may well come down to the fact that if it is Amy Barrett, she would have some ideological differences there, and she may just not vote for that reason.
Yeah, she is left with the proverbial wiggle room, and she can talk herself out of similar arguments, probably do those for ideological / religious reasons.
Right.
Which brings me to the next subject, because you wrote a piece that I noticed, and that goes back. I'd have to look up the exact date of that one, but it was about the kind of the differences between, can you be a Christian and have that guide your politics, or do politics get in the way, or
Right.
How to navigate through all that. If it is Judge Barrett, we are going, and there is a confirmation hearing, we are going to have a very interesting narrative battle on a few fronts. And one of those is going to be on this concept of, can you be a Christian?
Yes.
In this case, it's even further defined as a Catholic, as a charismatic Catholic Christian. And how does that guide your work as a judge and potentially as a justice? So your thoughts on how potentially that could play out on both sides of this equation?
Well, I hope it is. I mean, I hope it is Barrett, for many reasons. I think she would be wonderful. The timing of all this is really wild. You look back on this year and you think how we should have assumed this is how this is how the year would end up. I mean, after everything else. I guess it was Friday night when the news broke of Ginsburg's death, and I was just sitting in my room, and kids were being loud, and I saw her name trending on Twitter, and and that happens, and I looked and I saw, I told my husband, I yelled from the other room, and I said, "This is real. This is actually happened," because there's hoaxes every now and then. Mm-hmm. And it's wild because, and you mentioned the controlling the narrative. They have been attempting to play up the fact that Biden is Catholic. And now, if it is Barrett, we're suddenly being Catholic is not going to be so great. And the Democrats, as much help as they have from the media, this is not a needle they're going to be able to thread. If they do hold hearings, and I'm fine if they don't. I mean, I think there's no constitutional requirement for them. I don't know that they were a thing until, I don't know, maybe around 1920. And it's just a show for the cameras. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the senators can find out what they genuinely need to know. And I honestly, there's probably only a few who have genuine questions. They all know already how they're going to vote. And to put her through that, and she's already been through it once, which is another reason I think she would be great in this situation, because we've all already seen the tapes of her going back and forth with Dianne Feinstein.
That's a very good point. And that's one of the reasons, and I was looking into this the other night, is there precedent for actually having to have a hearing because of that very reason? I mean, it was 2017. It was 55 for, 45 against, or something like that. And the hearings, as we know, are really only designed, and this goes up and down the chain, any kind of hearing, they're only designed for sound bites.
Yes.
They're only designed for, and if you watched the Barr hearings, or his testimony or whatever it was recently, mm-hmm. where both sides claimed victory afterwards, it's entirely because of that reason. I mean, you got the one guy trying to thread that needle and say, well, Trump said he was a superb whatever, and does this underscore that? And every time that Barr did not answer with yes or no, he was obviously violating this sacred rule of order from the one questioner who just wanted his 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
So I think strategically, it's probably the best idea for them to just say, here's the nominee, and if it's her,
Yeah.
all right, let's just vote because we're not going to learn anything. The damage, and I love to get your take on this too, because I think the damage has already been done on both sides. Mm-hmm. So if you are, and even this week, and you can see, I could see some of this on Twitter this morning with people who, well, maybe not the independents, but definitely the people on the left were holding out hope that Mitt Romney was going to say, I can't do this because of whatever.
Yeah.
And so what he did during impeachment, which made him a quasi-hero of the left, has now made him a villain, unethical, immoral, whatever words you want to throw at him, when it's Mitt freaking Romney. So the guy is kind of milquetoast, right? So, and I think that there's not much that can happen on any front within the next 6 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it is, that's going to further cement anyone's vote.
Right.
I would almost argue that, and you saw this with, I've seen a little bit of it, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. When Vice President Biden was talking yesterday about his reasoning for not moving forward with this, one of the things he said was that they estimate that 30 million, he's all apoplectic, 30 million people have already voted. Mm-hmm. And would they change their vote? What it seems to me that they're trying to do is expand the window so that it's not election day, it's like election season. Mm-hmm. And they've already pushed the narrative of, right or wrong, of this red mirage and the fact that you won't. So we're ready for all of those sorts of messages. We've already been persuaded that that's coming.
Right.
So I guess your thoughts on whether or not that is a good idea on the part of the Democrats to say, all right, well, it's a bigger election window. So you may want to withhold making your mind because all of this stuff could still happen.
Well, I have never been a fan of all the early voting. I don't understand. I mean, I don't know. Here in Louisiana, it's very simple. I've had to do it early once when I was in college, and I had to go up to the courthouse one weekend. This was probably in 2000, the first time I voted for president. I voted for W. And other than that, I go on election day, you show them your license, and it's very simple. And so all of this other, I don't understand what is going on in these other states that, like you said, it's like a season, like this rolling election. And the Democrats are the ones who typically favor that, but they also scream about it, and truly nothing, we haven't had a debate yet. It remains to be seen if we actually do, Biden actually does debate. Nothing probably that happens at the debates is going to change anyone's mind. Nothing that happens with this SCOTUS situation, it's not going to change anyone's mind, I don't think. And so that argument to me just doesn't really hold water. The only reason that I would be tempted to say, yes, let's do it. Let's have the hearings. It's because it'll hurt the Democrats.
True.
I mean, I think that Barrett, she's obviously, she's a tough woman. She's got 7 children. She's already been through it once. She handled herself very well. So I hate to say, put her through it, because they will put her through it. And who knows what they'll come up with this time. I really feel like after Kavanaugh, they have lost the right to demand a hearing. It was such a total circus. And it would electorally, I think, from Trump on down, it could only help the GOP if they have a hearing, because the left is going to continue losing their minds, and they will make such fools of themselves, and they will go after this woman. They will go after her faith, her Catholicism, and you know, it'll hurt them. They'll be undercutting their big argument that Biden is this faithful Catholic, and they would literally have to make a distinction between good Catholic, bad Catholic, and that distinction essentially is he is not that devout and he's okay with abortion.
Right. And well, that's interesting too, because then you're asking the question of the Democrats to, on the one hand, say that Biden is Catholic enough, but on the other hand, say, I guess, that Judge Byrd is too Catholic.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a weird sliding scale or something.
Yeah.
And so I legitimately think she is very qualified. I would never suggest, oh, let's pick a Catholic nominee so we can highlight this hypocrisy of the Democrats. But she is just, in every way, she is perfect for this moment. I do think she's perfect for the job, but it's just, I mean, obviously, like I said, I hope it's her. I do not know a whole lot about the rest of those who've been mentioned. But her exchange, I went back and watched it again the other day, her exchange with Feinstein, and it was just one of the most interesting few moments and there have been so many of them in the last few years in our politics, because it blows the door off this idea that some people they don't understand what separation of church and state means. It doesn't mean we can't have a devout Christian who is, in any level of government. Certainly not. And, we have the Supreme Court has been dominated by Catholics for years, right? Sotomayor is a Catholic. She's the good Catholic, I guess.
Right. Yeah. She falls in that gray area of Catholic enough without being too Catholic.
Right.
I guess. Let me talk scenarios with you. So beyond the Supreme Court, and if we operate under the assumption that minds are made up when it comes to November 3rd, and we also buy into the assumption that it's likely going to be a contested election. And I think the prevailing wisdom is that unless Biden wins by a landslide, that we're going to see a contested election a whole bunch of places. If it's either announced or becoming beyond possible to probable that Trump wins re-election, what does that do to the collective beaten down psyche of the average woman on the left?
You mean if Trump is reelected?
If Trump is reelected, assuming that everything that we've talked about happens, and we've got a newly seated, highly Catholic Supreme Court justice, and it looks like Trump wins 4 more years.
Every phrase I can think of to use, it just seems like we've already used it. They've been pitching a fit for 4 years. So what will they do? Continue to pitch a fit? I don't know. We heard so many pronouncements when Kavanaugh was going through his confirmation about, in 6 months, you won't be able to get an abortion in the United States. And a lot of it is just people truly, I don't think they understand. I think there are people who purposefully misinform them so that they will maintain their hysteria. They don't understand what it would mean if Roe were overturned. They don't understand. I think they legitimately do not understand. It would just let the states decide. And I know people who are, I would say, moderately pro-choice, not up until the moment of birth, but within the first trimester. And when they're honest and they look at it, they know that Roe was a mess, and it was just legally, it's bunk. And so a lot of these women, and I cannot remember who it was yesterday who was on Twitter going on and on about female rage, and it's the same old story with feminism. It's just like with Catholicism, right? What's good for women, it's their version of what's good for women. It's never someone like me, who would love to. I mean, we talk about representation. I would love to see Amy Barrett on the Supreme Court. She's
one of you.
It makes me feel old. It makes me feel old
her.
because she is not that much older than I am. Goodness, I mean, she makes me feel like I need to, get up and get busy. She's so accomplished. And, so you talk about representation and the importance of diversity, but they don't mean any of it. They do not mean any of it, because, like you said, if we do face a situation, and we might, I don't have any idea, I really truly don't have any idea what's going to happen in November after the last election. I'm not even going to guess. I mean, I had to convince my husband for half an hour to turn the TV back on election night last time, because he just thought we just quit, we just quit watching and paying attention. And then I got back on Twitter and I was like, you're not going to believe this, but so who knows? I certainly think it's possible that Trump could win. It's frustrating because even if it's, I think, obvious to sane people that he does win, if that's the case, it's going to just be another 4 years of hysteria, and they're going to drag it out and go to court. And, and I guess it's sort of perfect that he's done what he has with the judiciary, and no matter what happens, he's going to leave us with some good judges, because we've already seen some bad judges making some terrible decisions about late ballots and accepting ballots up to 2 weeks after the election. And you can't do that and maintain, and I guess we're really not all that healthy right now. But if you don't have most of your population on board with your elections process, things are going to get uglier. I mean, they're already ugly.
I tend to agree with your assessment of what could happen if Trump wins. What about if it's clear or clear-ish on election night that it's going to be, I was going to say 4 years of Biden, but that it's going to be a Biden-Harris administration? Where does the right go from there?
There will be a post-Trump GOP. I don't know, we may be facing that soon. We may be facing it in 4 years. I hope that we take the good and leave the bad where Trump is concerned. He is a mess at times. He's not eloquent. I didn't vote for him 4 years ago. I didn't like him personally, but the reason I didn't vote for him is because I suspected he would govern basically like a Hillary. I mean, I really felt like we had basically two of the same as our options. He has surprised me in many wonderful ways. And I am going to vote for him this year. And I'm in Louisiana, so technically it doesn't matter. And that's part of that factored into my vote last time. But I'm so sick of him yelling about the popular vote that I'm going to vote for him just to give him one more. But I hope that whenever we are facing a post-Trump GOP, and we need an opposition party. I mean, somebody has to oppose the Democrats, because they're just losing their minds. And the GOP has so many issues. They had issues before Trump that led to Trump. We still have issues now. I still think it's the better alternative to, it's not perfect, but it's far better than what the left is offering. Um, I hope enough on the right see the necessity, the absolute necessity of meeting the media head on the way that Trump does. I mean, watching them lose their minds and watching him taunt them, it's just, I mean, it's just wonderful. They deserve it. They absolutely 100% deserve it because they're awful. They're absolutely awful. And they really have been for a long time. And I think Obama would have won no matter what. I don't know, had Romney pushed back against some of the accusations that were hurled at him. He was mocked mercilessly for his comment about Russia. The binder's full of women stuff, that Harry Reid just flat out lying about his taxes. Had Romney pushed back against some of that, he probably still would have lost. But I mean, it would have been nice to have seen a little pushback.
Right.
You cannot play with kid gloves. And Trump is just an absolute wrecking ball. And he does himself no favors at times, but largely because of things like Twitter and things even such as what we're doing now, people have the ability to largely bypass the media, and the media hates it. And I believe it has pushed them even further left. And, they're not subtle anymore the way that they once were about their bias. And so the GOP moving forward, I'm open to an ideologically diverse GOP. I look at the Democrats and I see the way that they treat, say, a pro-life Democrat, and it's not good. I mean, I have a Democratic governor who is pro-life, because this is Louisiana, and even our Democrats are pretty conservative. The lady Katrina Jackson, who authored the legislation that went before the Supreme Court out of Louisiana, that were we all of our friends on the Supreme Court screwed us over. She is a Democrat, but she's pro-life, and so like my governor has no future on the national level with the Democrats because he's pro-life. And that's the only reason. So I'm okay with a mix of views on a host of issues. But what we have to do is continue to find a way to counter the narrative. And that is going to be ugly at times. You cannot keep your pristine suits, clean and deal with what we're dealing with. You just can't. And I think that's one of the most important things for the GOP moving forward. Now, if it were me and I got to control everything, we need to get back to fiscal discipline. That's one of my biggest gripes with Trump. But I mean, that would be my biggest gripe with anyone. Romney would have spent too much money. Obama spent too much money. They none of them will address spending. So I would love to see a GOP that returns to that idea. I'm not going to hold my breath. But ultimately, the good of Trump, what you can learn from Trump, is that, yes, you have to take on the media. You absolutely have to. You have to push back. And that pushback is going to ruffle some feathers. But you don't have another choice. You just don't.
Is it possible, though, you talk about spending, is it possible for anybody to rein in spending? Well, let's just say post-COVID, no more stimuli.
Yes.
And we're looking at a runaway freight train of spending. Is it just going to be shrug your shoulders and it's just not going to happen?
I don't know. It's there was a time that I had high hopes that Paul Ryan might address it. I mean, we have to be specific. I mean, both parties spend too much. They argue over what they're going to spend too much on. Nobody wants to touch entitlements. I mean, that is it. That is the big issue. I mean, they take in. It's not a tax issue. there's no way they should not be able to survive on the amount of money that they take in taxes every year. They just have committed too much of it in too many different directions. And we use that word entitlements, which I think we need to get rid of the word, and because it sounds, it's too cheery. It's you're entitled to something. That means you're owed it. That's the problem. That's the problem. Other than people who have paid into Social Security, we're just giving people money. It's all built in every year, and we can't touch it, that they're not owed. And you have to address that. Who is that magic person going to be? Is that ever going to happen? And it's not just on the executive. It's not. I mean, part of the reason we're continually in the middle, it seems like, of these brutal SCOTUS fights is because Congress, they don't do their job. They don't legislate. They don't address things like spending. That is their actual job. They hold hearings so they can get, that's all they've done. That is all they have done. They're constantly running for re-election. They hold hearings so they can lambaste somebody for the nightly news shows and, tweet mean things on Twitter, and nothing that they're actually supposed to address is ever even hardly mentioned.
But I will say this about Congress. They have an approval rating of 8%. So
they have earned it.
Yeah. It's higher than 7. So it's a constant improvement.
And I'm honest, I'm usually not one to leap onto the term limits bandwagon. I feel like, I don't know. I do think that you need people in Washington who are not totally green, and they understand processes, and they understand their constituents. So I'm okay with somebody who is there probably longer than most people who favor term limits would be okay with. But the flip side of that is you have a Nancy Pelosi who, she just, if you saw her recent weird interview with Stephanopoulos, where she randomly stops and just
good morning.
Is she okay? Does she need to be running the House of Representatives? Probably not.
Well, in fairness to Madam Speaker, she's 80.
Yes.
So I would say that if I, God willing, live to be 80, I hope I can have my wits about me enough to be on national television and stick to some sort of script. But, and the other, I always think of the late Senator Byrd from West Virginia as the poster child for both sides of the term limit argument, because without Senator Byrd from West Virginia, a lot of the things that West Virginia would have been forgotten about. With Senator Byrd in West Virginia, they ended up with so much stuff that the grift machine was on overdrive. And that's also a problem. So I don't know the answer to it, other than the one time that I went quote unquote viral on Twitter was a Sunday morning in late June, when I had this diatribe thread about the fact that we're giving these politicians too much power. We're worshiping them too much. And that really, really needs to stop. And I thought, to bring this a little bit full circle, I thought that there was way too much on Justice Ginsburg's shoulders. Way too much. I would not wish that on anyone. And okay, I understand she had the work ethic of about 12 people put together. Right. And I applaud her for that. And I applaud her for being as diligent as she was. But you got to wonder if yes, she was wired differently, but didn't she also kind of deserve a few years of retirement?
Yeah. I
And
mean, I do. I hate it. I absolutely hate it for her. And I mean, ideologically, obviously, she was my opposite. But, just I hate it. I hate it that that's what the end of her life was and that she died, perhaps worrying about it, worrying that people would be upset. And I mean, I think she probably thought, like the rest of us did, that Hillary would win
yeah, and that she would,
and Hillary would replace her. And that's just not what happened. I thought about recently that photo came out of her performing a wedding and people were upset because she wasn't wearing a mask.
mm-hmm,
And then when all this happened last Friday night, I thought, she probably wasn't wearing a mask because she knew she was dying.
yeah,
Because this was mere weeks ago. And I absolutely hate it. And I look at the way that the left, I was upset when Scalia died. Um, but you look at the outpouring, just the hysterics from the left, and and it goes back to the what we were discussing earlier with regard to Byrd and Christians in power and Christians in government. When you don't have a belief in God and you don't think there is anything higher than government, then you see what happens. And people on the right are just as bad sometimes. I mean, I'm going to vote for the man, but I don't have the Trump worship that you do see from some people. It's just a bad situation. You don't worship people in that way. It's just weird and it's unhealthy. And one of the reasons that I think, and I guess I said this, it's been a month or more since I wrote the first piece that you mentioned. One of the reasons I think genuine Christians are a good bet in government is because if they have a true relationship with God, then they are going to be humbled, right? Like they know. I mean, how awesome would that be? I can't even imagine, to be a Supreme Court justice. That's going to go to your head. It goes to Nancy Pelosi's head. It gets even the best of people. And the only way to counter that is to have people in those positions who are in some way grounded and in some way are always cognizant of the fact that they answer to a higher power. And they don't feel like they are the end all be all, as obviously so many people running around Washington do.
yeah, that's a tremendous point. In the minute or so we have left, final thoughts, optimistic words, platitudes, memes, anything you want to share?
Oh goodness. I appreciate it so much. This has been a lot of fun. I've never done this before. I talk.
You seem like a veteran.
I talk on Twitter too much, so it's nice to actually do it. Goodness, it's hard to even encapsulate where we are right now. I mean, I wake up every day and I think, about a week ago, I think when Trump released his updated list of Supreme Court names, I think I just haphazardly, off the top of my head, I thought I tweeted. I think I said I want Barrett because there's all this, oh, I want Mike Lee, I want Ted Cruz, and
right.
And I think they would both make good justices. But after the Jeff Sessions debacle, I am not, and I have never been a fan of pulling people out of the Senate who are in a solid Senate seat. And so it occurred to me, maybe I think last night, I thought that's so weird. I just off randomly, never thinking we would be at this moment so soon. And now we could be days away from him dropping her name.
Yeah, that was also something that was, I think, just a little weird.
Yeah, in retrospect, yes.
And it hasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are two things that you've touched on that I haven't seen, and maybe this is the just a deference to the situation and the fact that we don't want to make it too political and weird and ugly and all that, but have not seen a lot of people talk about the maskless wedding incident
Right.
after it happened.
Right.
So it happened, and there was a bit of a, oh my gosh, wow, look at this. And then no more discussion about it. And yeah, the other point that you just mentioned too is the fact that Trump decided to drop the name. I mean, I guess you could argue, or his list of names, I guess you could argue that he was then pushing Biden to do likewise.
That was my assumption when he, at first I thought, well, this is kind of odd. He's already released a list. We've already seen 2 of the justices that he would nominate. And then I thought, well, it was a big deal when Trump released his list prior to the 2016 election. And I thought, they should push Biden, and they should continue to push Biden to release a list of names. And we all know why he's not.
Yeah.
Because
I was going to say he's not going to do it.
Yeah, there's some element of the left who would lose their mind over his, they would either be not liberal enough, or they would be super liberal, and it would turn off moderates and independents.
If it's got to be a list of 20 people, Stacey Abrams' name would have to be on it, because it's got to be a black woman. So that's the only other thing that I would be thinking.
But yeah, when I thought about the wedding photo, and then I thought about Trump releasing his list, and I don't know, who knows what the White House was told. I would assume maybe they knew that it was going to possibly be soon. But because we are in an election year, it wasn't that odd that he released an updated list of names. But it was sad to me when I thought about her performing that wedding. Because you're not going to wear a mask if you know that you're dying of pancreatic cancer.
Yeah. And perhaps that was, I mean, we don't know, but perhaps that was, she thought, hey, I can do a solid here, for a family member. And this is a cool way to go out.
Right.
But there we are. And we'll do this again, because you're a natural at this sort of thing.
Well, I really have enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we'll have another one down the road. So thanks everybody for watching.